Welcome along then to another episode of Tatum Talks. I'm Ian Brannan. Kelvin Tatum is with us, and Kelvin's one of his sidekicks, I guess, now in the world of television. Scott Nicholls, 7-time British champion, but more often than not these days also putting in some big scores in most places you go. I know that you had a little bit of a blip in Poland recently, Scotty. It's not been a great weekend, but on the whole, you must be really pleased with how your season started. First up.
Yeah, I am, mate, to be fair. Yesterday being a blip is an understatement, but we won't go there because I'm still wiping the teeth. I have, mate. It's been kind of doing the few for Wolverhampton. Obviously, I'm not doing the top league this year, excuse me, but it's been fun. It's been really cool to have the chance to mix up with some of the big boys, especially, going against Emil, somebody that I was looking forward to racing, and delighted I managed to sort of turn him over a couple of times. I honestly didn't expect that. So, so it's been pretty good.
Cool stuff. Well, we'll talk about the Premiership situation shortly, but we'll begin in Warsaw, which is where you both recently returned from. One of the big fixtures in the Speedway calendar. We talk, obviously, with great pride about Cardiff in this country, but on the world scene, that Warsaw Grand Prix is also a massive event, and probably you'd say, in some respects, bigger with the amount of people that they get in there at this moment in time. And it seemed to be, for a temporary track, there's been a lot of focus on these. Phil Morris said to me in another interview that Discovery were really putting a lot of effort into getting these tracks right this year. And they did a test event beforehand with some of the youngsters to sort of check that it was all right this time round, and that certainly seems to be the case, doesn't it? Because we saw fantastic racing, first of all, right from the off, Kelv.
Yeah, we did. I think, by and large, the track behaved pretty well. There were some little ruts and bits and pieces, but I think as temporary tracks go, I think you could say it was a success. It was unfortunate for Dominic Cabrera to actually slip off the bike and injure himself in the qualifying, which was just one of those unfortunate things. I don't think that was fundamentally down to the surface itself, but all in all, I think riders were conscious that there were one or two ruts out there, but they coped. We saw riders lifting quite violently at times in turns 3 and 4. But there weren't, it didn't get to anything like what we've seen in previous times when the tracks really deteriorate quite badly. So from that perspective, the racing was of high quality. It wasn't drama because they were being caught out by potholes in the track. So that was great. And the event actually went very well. 50,000 people, fabulous stadium. It was a big event, and obviously ending in with some controversy at the end. It had a bit of everything, to be honest. Right from heat 1, it just burst alive with Nicholson roaring round. I don't know what you thought, Scott, but because you were in the pitch, you may be a little bit nearer what people were saying and feeling about the track in particular.
Yeah, it was great. I mean, I think, excuse me, with Mickelson, it was one of those situations. I think he even sort of commented when I interviewed him that he was kind of put in that position by chance, really. He didn't necessarily opt to go there, and he's kind of, pick one off, and the next minute he's gone from last to first. And I don't recall a time seeing that happen in race 1. So that's a credit to the track. Yeah. I think Kelv said it's so hard to get these tracks down for one day. I mean, we see permanent tracks have ruts appear, and they've been down for centuries. So they do a credible job, and I think that the racing was great. I think the indoor ones can always be a little bit of a headache with a setup. And I think when you're down in the pitch, you see the boys, you see some pretty in-depth chats, and you can tell the ones that have kind of hit the money straight off the bat because they're kind of pretty calm and not really doing too many changes. The ones that have run a poor first or second race are up against it. And I think that's where you look at somebody like Zmarzlik and you really see why he's world champion, because he had a shocking start to the meeting. He worked hard with his mechanics. You could see the stress and the strain on his face, but he kept composed. He didn't throw his toys out of the pram, and made his first final.
You've ridden in these indoor circuits yourself, at Cardiff many times, and tell us about what those things are for the benefit of the fans that won't understand what you mean with the setups. Obviously, humidity and things like that play a big part, don't they, in how the engine performs?
They certainly do. I think Greg commented on it on the TV. You hear riders talking about jetting and things like that, which is that's a minefield in itself. And then, some people will appreciate it and don't, but some riders maybe take it for granted. But, you do practice, you've got an empty stadium, and it's, we take the oxygen out of there and put CO2 back in. Well, that's all to do with the air-fuel mixture. So you've got 50,000 fans in there. Do you gamble on changing the jetting to take that into account, or do you go with what you've got and see if it has affected it? It's all those little things, but then the track does change a lot. I don't know what they ride like now, but I know from past experiences when I've ridden before, I think the surface has changed a little bit. But I remember going out in one race and kind of having a good race, and then looking, thinking, oh, this track's slickening off. And then they do a track grade, and I'd be like, man, live, I needed a tooth back on because the bike was just dead. So these boys now will have had experience on the tracks and the surfaces, and it's all those little things that they need to take into account. Like Kelvin said, the ruts appearing. The way the bikes are revving now, there's a couple of boys, lifted aggressively. That's something where the riders have to be composed. You really have to, memorize where the ruts are, be prepared for them, because they can work to your advantage if you hit them right. The other rut issue is the starts at these indoor tracks get exceptionally deep. And it will depend on the start marshal. Some start marshals can be very anal and really be pulling you right up to the tapes. When they pull you right up, because the rut is so deep, you've already bottomed out. 2-minute clocks counting down. You've not got time to move. So, when you're bearing in mind now, we've got this no moving at the start. You've got the warnings and the pressure these boys will be under at the start. And in that environment, an indoor stadium, and there's no doubt about it, you feel the intensity more when you're on the track. You can feel the energy from the fans. And that all adds to the kind of elevated heart rate, should I say, at the start line.
Yeah, it was fantastic. I obviously, it is in a different environment. It's an unusual environment that, you've just been explaining it, Scott, because you effectively are indoors. But when we focus on the event itself, we've had 2 rounds of the World Championship. It started in Godeshan. Obviously, it pretty much went to plan for Zmarzlik there. But as you say, he got off to a very poor start in Warsaw, and all of a sudden, he was under an immense amount of pressure. The meeting was sort of almost running away from him. It is remarkable how he remains composed. He obviously has a tremendous relationship with his crew, where he can actually, they figure things out, and then he bounces back with victories and puts himself into contention once again for the semi-finals, because that could have drifted away from him. I think what I would like to say is that obviously he made the final for the first time. He got on the podium. But I think the elephant in the room about the whole night, which overshadows Freddie's win and what happened to Jack Holder, was the decision that was made by the referee in the final. I think all sorts of discussion. Obviously, internet's gone balmy. Social media's gone nuts about it. I saw it that Zmarzlik should have been excluded. It was a 50-50-ish call, but I think when you look back at it, I felt that Zmarzlik should have gone. But I just sensed the circumstances and the stature of the rider did play into that. I don't know if you felt that, Scotty, but I just sensed that he didn't want to exclude Zmarzlik. He just didn't want to do it.
Oh, man, massively. I think his instinct probably was to press the button and pop Zmarzlik out, and then he probably looked down and thought, holy moly, there's 50,000 people that are not going to be happy here. That should never be the case. I agree. I think personally Zmarzlik should have been out. What I will say is, and this is, Kelv, you can appreciate this from a rider's perspective, Doyle knew what was happening. I'm not going to candy coat it. Doyle knew what was happening. Doyle knew Zmarzlik was there. There was contact. Could Doyle have stayed on? Could Doyle have read the situation and let Zmarzlik through? Of course he could. But he didn't. And he stuck to his lines. Zmarzlik knocked him off. There was contact, which means Zmarzlik, in my eyes, should have been out. So there's going to be lots of people who say, Doyle lay down, Doyle did this, Doyle did that. But it's a final. Doyle knew in that split second he had one option. He was either going to stick to his line and there would be contact. No, there's going to be contact and he's going down, and he rolls the dice on being put back in the rerun, or He moves out the way, lets Marslick through, and he's last and no chance of getting on the podium. So you can look at all the different angles of it, but fundamentally, the situation was how it was, and I think Marslick was very, very lucky and should have been out. And in turn, for me, that's obviously robbed Jack Holder, who deserved to win that final. He was probably one of the most composed and best riders on the night, and should have won.
Yeah, I can't disagree with that. I think a lot of people feel sympathy for Jack Holder. I sense that that you can argue it both ways, but in the end, you gotta make a decision. I think a lot of people outside Poland would agree that Jason Doyle was hard done by. I think if we reflect on Jason Doyle just quickly as well, is the fact that Doyle has actually come back into this year. He looks revitalised, he looks focused, he's made 2 finals. I think he can probably be frustrated, of course. He did the right thing by not giving Smarslick a right hook on the way off the track. I think that might not have gone down very well. But I think he will be reflecting on the fact that he is in it. He was terrific through the heats in Warsaw. We've seen him struggling big style in the last couple of years. And for him now, all of a sudden, to be a bit more relaxed and a bit more under control is encouraging. And I think that's what he can sort of just reflect on, sort of moving forward towards Prague.
Definitely. I'd like to touch on that because obviously, yes, I'm down in the pits, and there was a point where I did say to the director, do you want me to see if I can get hold of Doyle? And he was like, yes, okay, go and speak to him. And to be fair, fortunately, they couldn't get a camera quick enough, because I was actually then thinking, oh crap, I don't know if I really want to speak to Doyle right now. But that said, the last 2 GPs, he's been very unfortunate, and he's to be fair, he probably looked like he's going to win on both occasions. But no, he didn't give Smarslick a right hook, which you would have probably expected last year and the year before. And also in the pits, there would have been a few expletives, and he would have probably let a bit of frustration out, but not the Doyle that you would have seen before. I expected Doyle to walk down that tunnel and be kicking the hell out of everything in sight, and he didn't, which says a lot. I think there's an awful lot of frustration there and disappointment, but he's still seeing all the positives. And I did have a quick chat with him as I walked out the stadium, and he was gutted, but he actually seemed in a pretty good spirit and pretty calm, which I think is a positive sign, because he started this year on fire, and I think with him and now Freddie pushing on the way he is, could they be a threat to Smarslick, because his cage has been rattled and he hasn't had it his own way. So who knows? Maybe the title race could be a bit more up for grabs than just a 1-horse race.
Could be. Obviously, Ian, you didn't see all of the meeting, but obviously we've addressed the pit that everybody's talking about there, and I think it looks like we're pretty much agreed on the way it should have gone. I think we can go into depth a little bit more on the meeting itself. I think there were some surprise performances in regard to what they didn't do in Warsaw. Obviously riders like Matej Janowski and Leon Madsen in particular, coming off the back of Godeshan, where they just didn't get going at all. I sense that they must have felt that they needed to really up their game, but in truth, neither of them really did. And they have really got to do some soul searching, those 2 lads, if they're going to make any impact this year. But also Robert Lambert, I think there was so much excitement and high expectations for Robert, and just I think I'm old school now, but I can't understand that. Where did that come from, Scott? 1 point from 3 rides, and he rode so well in Godeshan. It was so good, and to be so far off it, to me, did he get caught out by the indoor arena? Did that just sort of confuse the issue a bit there?
Well, to be fair, when I interviewed him at the end, I had a sort of brief chat with him before we actually went live, and I said, mate, just repeat that, because what he said was good. And he just said he kind of did get a little bit caught out by Mickelson, a little bit, and I think that kind of possibly upset his path for the night. And I had a shocker of a day in pony. I didn't get to race until heat 10, but sometimes when you're not on the money or not close to it in your first race, then you're searching, and it's the pressure you're under. And I find this is where the experienced riders, or the calm riders, and the riders that have got a really, really good team around them, that's where they shine. Because as a rider, sometimes when you've got that amount of immense pressure on you, and then you're looking at your program going, geez, I've only got a couple of races to get my stuff together. What am I going to do? You can't think. Your head's so cluttered because you're so determined to do well, but it's almost like your feeling of what's happening on the bike, you're lost. And you're searching, and you kind of gamble on things, and you do stuff, and then you roll up to the line, and you're, oh, have we gone the right way? Have we done the right thing? And it's so easy to say, but the minute you roll up to that start line, especially at an event like that, and you've not convinced that you've made the right choice, you're already on a back step. And the guys next to you know they're on the money. You haven't got hope in hell, because these riders are all at their top of their game. And like you said, like with Madsen, spoke to him after, said, have you changed anything? Like, is anything different from next year? And he was sort of pretty brief, and he was like, no, everything's all good. We're on track. And he seemed quite upbeat, but Kelv, that's Speedway, isn't it? You can have something that was $1 million last year, you roll into the following season, do not change a thing. You might not even change a bloody set of mudguards, but it doesn't work, and you can't answer why. And that is the headache that has been in Speedway from day one, and it'll be there till day zero whenever the Speedway dries out, which it never will be. It'll always be there. That headache will never ever go.
Yeah. I think it's it just then, that's where you see the guys that can actually turn it around. And I think it was obviously on show with Bartosz Marzlik in that stadium where he's got off to that poor start and he was able to put himself back on track. But when you reflect on the result, Ian, I think that we've got joint leaders of the World Championship with Freddie and Schmarzlik at the top of the charts there. I do sense that Schmarzlik was tight in the Narodowy. I think the pressure on him, the expectation there, I think is huge. I can't imagine it. And I think in some ways he'll be a touch relieved to have made a final. He got a third place out of it. He's still the favourite for the championship moving forward. I think he'll be quite chuffed to get to Prague and kick on from there.
I think as well we need to talk about Freddie Lindgren, because we spoke when we did our GP preview not long ago about what sort of form he was going to be on, and I remember doing an interview with Freddie at the Sam Masters testimonial, which you rode in, Scott. I think it was one of his first fixtures of the year, and he was saying, I feel good now, I feel ready for the year, and I can get back in there, and I want to have a shot at the world title once again. Now I've got the health issues out of the way, and I know, Kelvin, you were saying, I hope that is the case, that he is as good as he says he is. And well, Scott, Scott's just dropped out, unfortunately, but we've seen now that he is back to the Freddie that we know.
He is, and I do know that, when you look at the performance in Gorashan, he just squeezed into the semi-finals on countback. In actual fact, he only got in as a consequence of being fourth in the world last year. It was an extraordinary scenario, but he then made the best of it and finished third on the night. And then he comes out and wins. He's got a fantastic, CV in the Narodowy. He's won there before, 2 victories. He's made the rostrum nearly every time. But it does appear that he is in good health and in good spirits. I know that they've made some changes. He switched back to the belt drive on the bike after Gorashan. He's loving that. He feels that's an advantage. But no, I think, again, there's another rider that, in his mid to late 30s now, he's got a settled team around him. He's feeling good, but working well with them. And I think that could prove to be really beneficial. I don't know over the course of the next rounds whether he'll beat Smarzlik, but there's no question that he could prove to be his main challenger. But no, fair play to him and congratulations to him. It was a great effort from Freddie and clearly delighted. He was very gracious actually in the fact that he did mention straight away that he felt for Jack Holder, because Holder was away. But you see a lot of Speedway, you get a rerun. It doesn't matter whether it's the final of a Grand Prix or that, in a National League development meeting, a rerun, and it can be very different. So, but he's been around long enough. It was an opportunity, and he took it. So it was a great effort.
Talking about Freddie Lindgren, you have got first-hand experience, of course, riding against Freddie around Munmore at the Sam Masters testimonial, but you've seen him in the Grand Prix as well. And it was all that question of, has he put his health issues to one side? And I think it's certainly on the current form, it certainly seems to be the case that that Fast Freddie is back again.
Yeah, he's fast again. Definitely, like, he rode very well at Sam Masters testimonial. I had a great race with him, and he seems to be enjoying his racing as well. I think it's kind of seems like the older riders seem to be able to apply that to the racing at that level. And the health issues, I mean, that must have been such a burden for him, and he's shown an immense amount of resilience to overcome. Like I said before about rolling up the start line, feeling like you've not got the right setup. When you roll up the start line, not feeling strong, fit and healthy, knowing all these other boys, because they are athletes now. Back in the day, speedo riders weren't necessarily the fittest bunch of people. Now they are at that level. And that's a massive part of the build-up to a Grand Prix season and during the season. So for him to have been at the level he was and to have got a medal again last year, carrying that illness, it's showing right now that he's strong, fit, and he's joint leader of the championship.
And these health issues were really quite bad, and he's said in the statement, the press conference after, the Grand Prix, and I'll just quote him. He says that nobody knows how hard I've had it for the last 3 years, only my nearest family and mechanics. And this went on from the very start of the pandemic. He caught COVID fairly early doors. Of course, there was no treatment or knowledge about it then, and it really did affect him. And he's been in, quite a bad place, was losing his breath. Obviously, you need to be fairly fit, as you say, but it's taken him a long time. But, best wishes to him on a, personal point of view, because obviously it's good that he's got his health back, but to the point there where he is still able to perform on this world stage again now, and up there at the top with Bartosz. And Bartosz is only number one in the world currently on prior rank. So that's the only thing separating them.
Yeah, it is, and he's shown it, like I said. I mean, and and also Freddie's not had it easy either. I mean, he's had to work his socks off in Croatia and in Warsaw. He's had his fair amount of luck. I mean, he's had kind of the rub of the green with riders making mistakes and things like that. But then at the same time, you have to put yourself in that position to take advantage of those mistakes, and he's done that. And joint leader of the World Championship.
That's Speedway, isn't it? You need a bit of luck on the way.
Oh, there's no question. It's but you make your own luck, and that's what I'm saying. He's put himself in those positions by riding hard. He's always forceful, we know that, but he's fast right now, and he's fit and healthy, and he's going to take some stopping.
Yeah, I'm not sure how Dan Bewley felt about it in the semi-final, but obviously it looked like that Dan might have got wiped out there with Freddie lifting violently. But I tell you, he is a hard-working rider right now, and he fully deserves to be up there. And as I say, he's paying his due, and he grinds the results out. He doesn't seem to let a last place. He had a blip in the middle of the meeting, but he turned it around and stood on top of the box. So, but I think overall, Ian and Scott, I think regarding the event, I think it was a big venue in a capital city, in the powerhouse which is Poland. And I think by and large, I think we can say that it was a terrific advert for World Championship Speedway. I think the powers that be would have been relatively pleased with the way that was observed and watched. I think it was pretty good. And just working from my perspective out in the stadium, you can hardly hear yourself think. But the fact is it's a very impressive looking arena. And I think even if you weren't a genuine Speedway fan and you just sort of bumped into that, I think you might just have taken a look at it because it looked pretty impressive.
Yeah, it did. And it's an amazing stadium. Like you say, it's in the Mecca of Speedway in Poland. And what Ian had said right at the beginning, that DSC want to put more effort into getting the tracks good, especially temporary ones. And fair play to them, and they should be. At the end of the day, that's the stage for the riders to perform on. And it goes to show when you put a good racetrack out with the world's best speedo riders, you get some fantastic racing. So hopefully that can apply to Cardiff and any future events that they plan to put on.
Next up then for the Speedway Grand Prix is Prague, coming up on June the 3rd. That'll be the third round, with the standings with Bartosz Szmarczyk and Freddie Lindgren tied at the top on 36 points. Jason Doyle, 28 points in third. Jack Holder currently fourth on 26. Robert Lambert, in fifth on 23 points. Ty Woffenden currently sixth on 21. Martin Vasilik also on 21 in seventh. Dan Bewley in eighth on 20. Max Frick, 9th, Mikkel Mikkelsen, 10th, Leon Madsen, 11th, Matt Sajanowski, 12th, Anders Thompson, 13th, Patrick Dudek, 14th, Bartosz Kowalski, 15th, Kim Nielsen, 16th, Mate Zagar, 17th in the world currently with 1 point. I don't think he's going to add to that. Vaclav Milik gets the shout as the wild card in Prague for the next round there, Kelv.
He does, and an interesting character. Vaclav Milik has been around a while now, but actually sort of seems to have regained some form this season. Milik spent a bit of time in the UK riding a pool, but fundamentally has been just ridden on the continent. He had some really strong performances as a wild card previously in the Grand Prix, and it looked like he was really going to make that step forward and become a fully fledged Grand Prix rider. Rode for Wrocław in the Extraliga and was looking really good. And then, for whatever reason it was, he sort of left Wrocław, rode for another club in Poland. His form deserted him, and in the last 2 or 3 years, almost looked like he was going to be slipping out of the sport. But I sense that he's regained some of his confidence, and Milik could be somebody that could be a spoiler in Prague, because when he's on top form, he's a very useful performer. I don't know what you think, Scotty, because I don't understand why he sort of lost his form, but Milik is no mug. I tell you, he's quite handy.
Oh, he's no slouch at all, and yeah, I just echo what you said, Kelv. He did look like his rider on the up, was just about to break into the scene, and then for whatever reason, he kind of the form went away from him. But looked at his scores this year. He's been putting in some solid scores in Poland. And he knows his way around Prague. Like you said, he's certainly mixed up there in the past, and I think he'll come in a lot more confidence on his side. And he'll be a man to beat. He'll certainly be mixing up. He's not afraid to ruffle the feathers. He's a gutsy little rider, so he could create a little bit of excitement.
And then heading to Tetrov the week after for Germany, and Kai Hülkenberg, conversely, the wild card there as well. So it's a busy time. Got a few weeks off now, effectively, haven't you? But then it's two weekends back to back on the horizon.
Yes, the Grand Prix campaign actually is busy in June, full stop, because there were 3 Grand Prix in June with Gorzów later in the month. So it's at the end of June, we're at the halfway point. And so it's crucial times, and when you reflect on Kai Hülkenberg just briefly, a quality rider, and I expect him to do well and more than capable of making the semi-finals. But from Grand Prix riders that have got off to a slow start, this Grand Prix campaign, with the 5 Grand Prix being completed at the end of June, riders like Leon Madsen, the world number 2. Those guys now are going to be under pressure now to try and get on a really fast run, and I just sense that that it will make or break their season. So, 2 very different venues coming up. Obviously, permanent tracks. Prague is fast, can be difficult to overtake, and Tetro last year was really tricky to ride. So. Patrick Dudek, another rider that's out of form, he bounced back to form there, an unexpected win for him there, but he was able to kick on from there. So busy month of June, and as I say, 4 Grand Prix within a month effectively. So it's going to be busy times for them GP stars, so they're going to have to get right on top of their games.
Yeah, and then the World Cup, of course, not long after that. So we'll talk about that separately, though. But it's certainly going to be a busy summer for those guys, not least just on the international scene, but of course on the domestic fronts as well in various forms. And we'll turn our attention now, shall we, to the British Premiership, because people keep asking this question, despite you answering it many times, Kelvin, that the Eurosport coverage is about to begin, and the 22nd of May is the date. And at the time of recording this, that's just a week away from now. And you will be live for the first time at the Pidcock Motorcycles Arena, Beaumont Park, Leicester, the home of the Leicester Lions, who have made the move up to the Premiership this year. And they are taking on the Sheffield Tigers, who are widely fancied as one of the teams to watch out for this season. And your British coverage gets underway Monday night then in Leicester.
Yeah, it does, and welcome back, Scott. But it does, and the British scene obviously has been decimated at the moment by weather. Just bumping into Adam Ellis at the weekend, just saying they haven't had a Sheffield Tigers, they haven't had a meeting at home for 7 weeks, which is far from ideals. But no, we burst onto the screens next week with the Leicester v Sheffield. Leicester, great to see them making the move back into the Premiership. So we've got 7 clubs in the top division, which is good news. It's a solid looking team. It's the sort of team I think that if they're going to make the playoffs, they're going to all have to fire. They're going to need consistency from Frick, who was the eye-catching signing in the wintertime. Riders like Chris Harris, who had a great season last year for Peterborough. He needs, we're going to get with Chris. He's going to give everything. Nick Morris obviously came up with the club. But all in all, I think they're a decent outfit. But they're going to be under pressure because Sheffield in town next week. I think that'll be a stern test for them, because I fancy Sheffield this year. I think they look like they could go all the way, particularly if they get Ellis really firing. I think Sheffield will be a match for anybody. But no, just delighted that we're going to finally get underway. It's late, but better be late than never. And let's hope that the weather behaves itself and we get some sunshine and we can get up and running and we have a good opening meeting.
I think with the best will in the world, with the way that the weather has been, I'm not sure how many fixtures you would have got away necessarily on a Monday. Anyway, because the weather, Scott, you will know this firsthand. It has been hellish, but you've been riding quite a bit as well with Wolves. I think you've ridden 5 meetings, and you've got another one to come this week at least. So let's talk about Wolves from that point of view. You've been involved in the Premiership. What's been your experience of the places you've been? Because I think you've been pretty much everywhere or faced every side now, haven't you, in the course of the league? Or at least you should have done.
Yeah, I've rattled a few of them off. I think Wolves, they're always a class outfit. There's always a good feel within the club at Wolves. Pete Adams, he's a dry character, but he's a good team manager. He kind of says it pretty much how it is. A bit old school, a bit like Pratty used to be in some respects. And they haven't changed their team much, which I think is a good thing. They've brought, obviously, Rory Sline's come back and he's in great form. He's maybe had a couple of little blips, but he's had a season out. Obviously, it's a real shame about Luke Becker, because I think he had a little bit of a tough year, but I think it's quite common for young riders to have a kind of bit of a peak and then have a little bit of a dip. And I believe he probably would have been on the upscale again this year, but obviously he had that injury right at the start, and hence why I've done a few fill-in rides just while he gets himself fit. But I think, with Wolves, they're good at home. They've got an exceptional rider in Sam Masters at number 1, and the atmosphere and the spirit within the team is good. And I've always been a believer that that's a massive part of a successful team. I agree with what Kelv said. I think Leicester have got a very solid team. I think that meeting on Monday will be an exciting prospect. I think Sheffield are a strong outfit too. You've got to give full credit to Leicester. The track in the past has been criticised for being bumpy and rough and unpredictable, but when I was there the other week, possibly a little bit on the slick side, but it was very smooth. You could race it inside and out, which is great, and I think if they can just get a little bit more of a top dressing on there, we could be in store for a great first meeting on Eurosport.
And Sheffield, of course, they've got what the common owner with the Bates family involved with Sheffield and Leicester. So as a result, there are riders in both teams that have ridden for either side. But as far as Sheffield goes, they're going there with the likes of Kyle Howarth, of course, who was the Leicester captain as recently as last year in the Championship. So they've got a lot of home advantage, even though they're away side.
Oh, definitely. I think the fact now that it's smoother will have evened the track up a little bit. It was a track that some people didn't like going to, but I think people now that you can attack it and go into the corners without the fear of kind of bouncing across the corner and end up in the hot dog stand, that they can actually get stuck in. Kyle Howarth is a proper out-and-out racer, and he'll use that experience he's got from racing at Leicester before. There may be a little bit of bragging rights between the Bates family as to who comes out on top on Monday night. But whatever happens, it'll be a close one. Max Frick is kind of starting to hit a bit of form there. He's had I think by his own admission, he's probably had a bit of a tough start to the season, especially in Britain. Probably hasn't hit the scores he would like to have hit. But when I was there at Wolves the other week, he was in much better form, had some good speed, and he felt a lot better. He felt like he was more happy with the setup he's got. So, look for a big night from him.
And Bomber as well, of course, at Leicester now.
Oh, they've got some races. Oh, yeah, Bomber, like Kelv said, you know what you get with Bomber. It's going to be 4 laps of bouncing off the airbags and maybe hitting the curb the odd time. But he's a racer. Possibly hasn't quite carried the form on from last year. Possibly had a little bit of a dip. I don't know if that's kind of mechanical or if it's just a little bit of slight lack of form from him personally. But no, he's a racer. And Richard Lawson, he's one of those riders that always goes under the radar for me. But I think he's a class act. Kind of keeps himself to himself. He's not flash and flamboyant, but he gets the job done. He's a very, very good gator. And when the tracks are a little bit slicker, that's prime. And I think, like Kel said earlier, I think with Leicester, they've got strength right from top to bottom. To be fair, Sheffield have a lot of the teams are like that now this year, which all that does is creates an unpredictable scoreline.
Could well be. I sense that Sheffield are the stronger outfit, just about. But as I say, I think that the Leicester lineup has got quality in it, and I think that they will. You know, Nick Morris obviously knows that he came away from Wolverhampton, which was a slight surprise, but he was obviously there in the Championship, so he's got plenty of experience. But with the change, Emil Saifusanov clearly quite enjoyed his visit to Leicester, because obviously he took about half a second off the track record. So it's clearly, because I don't think he would have enjoyed it if it had been bumpy and rutty and horrible. But there's no question that the Emil turned up and just fell in love with the place. But no, really excited about the matchup and keen to get underway with the Eurosport coverage. If we've had a bit of a chat about Wolves, because you've had a bird's eye view of that, Scott. What about Bellevue, the champions? Then we look at them. They got off to a sort of an indifferent start with Dan Bewley out of form, but subsequently they sort of got on the road and they actually strung a few good results together. What do you think about their chances and the lineup they've got right now?
Well, it kind of sounds like a broken record, but a lot of the team, they're strong this year. I mean, they brought some big names back, like you say, with Dan Bewley coming back. No, I mean, when I looked at a few of the scores early doors, I was scratching my head probably as much as he was, because the scores weren't what we expected from Dan Bewley, especially at Bellevue. But, he's obviously found something. He's hitting a bit of form. They've got strength. I mean, Jesus Christ, you've got Jamin Lidge. Is he still down at reserve or towards a reserve berth? And he's an extra league rider. That goes to show that in some respects on paper, British Speedway doesn't look as strong as Poland and places like that. But trust me, it's tough racing here. A lot of the guys, when they travel from overseas, they look at riders that they probably don't necessarily rate on the continent. But when they're on home soil, they're blooming strong and tough to beat. I think Bellevue are obviously going to carry a bit of confidence of being the champions, and they're going to want to retain that, and that's going to kind of give them a little bit of a puffed up chest. But along with that comes the fact that everybody is gunning for you and everybody wants to beat you, and every time you line up, whichever team he is want to go home saying we just beat the champions or the defending champions. So Lemo's pretty good at keeping the boys in track, but I think they've got a good a good chance. I think with young Norrick, I mean, he had a fantastic season last year. I think it's just if he can build on that and make that progression, I think that can be a kind of bit of a trump card for them.
Yeah, I was just thinking that last year it was a fantastic finale, of course, when they beat Sheffield in the playoff final. I just sensed that would they be able to, because they didn't have that extra heat leader that they did last year with Zagar coming in, and they kicked on from there, because they are looking at one of the younger, slightly lesser riders like a Tom Brennan to sort of fill that role. And if they can, then I think they'll give everybody a run for their money. But, they're looking good, and after a difficult start, I think they're beginning to find their feet, Ian. And I think that, you've seen Ipswich lately, and obviously so have you, Scott. But I sense that the eye-catching signing of Emil Sayfutdinov, and with Jason Doyle and Sayfutdinov matching up, they look like they're very serious about this season.
Yeah, I think you can certainly not write off Ipswich at all. And obviously people are talking about Sheffield and Bellevue, but Ipswich for me, especially with Sayfutdinov and Doyle, and I was at the fixture against Peterborough, and yes, Peterborough are not having the best season ever and are lacking a number one. But that said, it was just incredible to see Sayfutdinov racing, in a league match in this country again. And it was just the first heat he was out there. He was just in a different world. I mean, he was like a whole straight ahead of everybody else. And I've never seen Premiership level riders riding around like they're on engines that are just half as powerful. And he was just blasting away. And then, of course, you see Doyley and Sayfutdinov together in Heat 13, and they're both just blasting away. And they're just so much quicker around there. And obviously, they're going to visit some tracks that they might find a little bit trickier throughout the course of the season, but certainly at home. With Danny King as well doing what he, maybe along with yourself, Scott, there's few riders who have got as much experience around Vauxhall as Danny King now. He's been there, 17 years or so in total. And he just knows exactly where to go. And there's just this calm of, if they are under the cosh in a heat, if somebody does get out there in front, that they'll just bide their time and they can change what it might be a 5-1 to a 3-3, and they just reel it in. You know what Doyley's like, Sayfutdinov's the same, and just that experience, but also the speed. It's, I think that they can come up on the rails pretty quickly.
Yeah, I think Ipswich is a team that's just, I think they got the edge on the others. And a lot of that hinges on Danny. Danny seems to be in form again. He had a bit of an off-season last year. Like you said, around Ipswich, there's no one with more experience in that team than him. But, I mean, man alive, that's a powerhouse at 1 and 5. There's not a stronger partnership out there than that. And home or away, I mean, those boys are going to... I don't think there's going to be many heat advantages against them in Heats 13 and 15. Emil's just riding. I mean, genuinely, when I watch him ride, I love watching him ride. He's not just super fast, but he's smooth. He's in control. It's quite hard to explain because he really attacks the track, but he does it in such a calm, smooth, and controlled way. And yeah, I was fortunate to see him racing at Ipswich and had a great race. I think he's just enjoying racing his motorcycle again. He's loving being in England. He's just loving making up for lost time. Doyley, he's just got that bit between his teeth. Every race is a championship race, and that's how he's at his best. Some riders back in the past have kind of, when it's coming up to World Championship, they tone it down a level. I mean, I always remember Eric Gunderson, bless him. I remember seeing him at Ipswich as a kid one night, and I thought, my God, like, what's happened to Eric? There's a World Championship that weekend, and he was just not taking any risks, whereas Doyley's the opposite. He's just every race banging in. And I think that rivalry between him and Emil, because he'll want to maintain that number one race jacket, and I think, they'll keep that in check as long as they don't start racing each other. That can only be a benefit to Ipswich Witches.
Yeah, absolutely. They are strong as it currently stands, but also, as you say, enjoying it. There's that the team spirit is another thing. Sometimes you don't necessarily notice that if you're watching on the terraces and seeing the riders out there doing their rides and going back in again. But in the pits, we've seen that they're all working for each other. You know what Danny King's like as a team guy, but Doyley's the same, and also Kenyon Rue is coming on leaps and bounds as well in the pits. He's he's between Doyle and Saifutinov. So the stuff that he's going to be learning jammed in between those two guys in the pits as well, he seems to be developing, week on week too.
Yeah, he is, and I think that's all of a benefit. I know he's got, Cam Heaps is kind of helping him a little bit there, but in the back room, my old mechanic, Mashek, he's a very, very good mechanic, knows not just obviously Polish Speedway, but he's been in England for an awful long time. He's very good with the setups and engine tuners and things like that. So Keenan's got a good backroom staff to help him. All the bits and pieces are in place for Ipswich Speedway. I think the only slight question mark is what do they do with the wrist situation? I'm hearing that hopefully he's finding some answers and he'll be back. And if he's in form, man live, Eric on his day, my God, he's a heat leader. So if he comes back and he comes back in form, then for me, Ipswich are the team to beat.
Well, we've got to look at either Peterborough or Kings Lynn. I think Peterborough...
Save the best till last.
Yeah. I think it's, Peterborough, 2 seasons ago with Dad's Army, Scott, you were, well and truly part of that. It was just an incredible season where they just took the league by storm, had this team that just got on a roll. They embraced the fun with the Dad's Army chance, and it just happened. And then last year, going from hero to zero, it's tough. Riders out of form, injuries, can't find that, Bjarne Pedersen retired, and, even with, at the change of the team, it looked good, like that Benjamin Basso coming in, who was quite good actually. He was pretty good for the team, but just couldn't get that spark going. And then this year, another team. But I must say, when I first did it, and we did our first podcast, I did have some concerns over the team, because Hans Andersen, Niels Christian Iversen, Nicky Pedersen, all now veteran stage, and certainly they were going to have to find form and quickly. And losing, I think, Chris Harris, I think that was a big blow to lose Chris after he was one of their better riders last year. And unfortunately, Nicky did a corner and then jacked it in, and that was a massive blow. I can imagine that the club were just thinking, wow, an eye-catching signing like that, and that hasn't worked out, and they haven't been able to replace him. So it's tough times for Peterborough. Some of these rain-offs may have given them a little bit of breathing space, to maybe they can sort of find themselves and get some form, but they need a number one big time. I don't know what you think, Scott, but they need a leader in there.
Oh, 100%. But it's hard to find one. Who can they get? I think everybody plays a game of, if they were team managers, who would they get? And there's a few riders out there, but they don't want to come, or they've got other commitments. So I feel for Peterborough, and they 100% need a number one. They need a strong number one. But they need a number one that's got something about him that can lead a team and can put a bit of positive energy in the team again. Because what I've heard, I haven't seen it, but I'm hearing the atmosphere is not the same. I know when I was there last year, the atmosphere wasn't the same, and that's a huge part of being in a sport like this, is having a good atmosphere. Because if you're having a bit of an off day, you're having a bad day racing-wise, if you've got a good team around you, it kind of helps lift you. You kind of don't feel quite so bad, and everybody can crack on. But when you don't have a strong leader, and with the uncertainty of who's coming in and all the fixture changes, it just creates a negative atmosphere throughout the whole team. And I think they need to nip it in the bud quick, because if you don't stop it now, it will just continue for the rest of the season. So, like you said, the rain-offs may have played into their hands, but that's only if they can sign the number one, get a bit of atmosphere back in the team, a bit of leadership, and ultimately get a win under their belt.
I think Rob Lyon's really frustrated about the number one situation, and I know that he has gone to Grand Prix, I think, as well, to try and speak to riders that might be tempted to come over, but they're just hitting a brick wall, I think, wherever they go. And I think he's frustrated because in some respects it's out of his hands because he's not the person that actually does the signing. He's the team manager, and it just sounds like after every meeting, and the most recent one that I was at, Ipswich versus Peterborough, he just said is I feel like I'm saying the same thing after every meeting, but we need a number one, and it's just time's getting on now. We're not far off June, and they're still without one, and it's a difficult situation to resolve, and I'm not sure entirely the Nicky situation is fully resolved necessarily either. So it's all a bit complicated, and similar as well. With Kings Lynn, we were saying at the start of the season that doubt about which Christoph Kasperzak was actually going to turn up. Was it the one that was advertised that was going to be back to being a world beater, or would it be the one that scores 15 one week and scores 3 the next? I think. Well, Kelvin, I'll hand it over to you to decide which one's turned up.
Well, we've got the one that is hit and miss. It's as simple as that. To me, he is a top quality rider. He was a former world number 2, but I do believe his best days are behind him. But he's more than that. He's more than capable of doing a very good job for a British club. I know that. He knows Britain. He's done plenty of laps here. He's ridden here for periods of time. But he's at a stage of his career now where, inexplicably he got 15 the other week, didn't he? And then he turns back up and it's a 2 or a 3. And, that from a team manager's and from a club's perspective. Okay. but from a club's point of view, Scotty, it just drives you nuts when you're looking at a guy that should be able to produce the numbers, day in, day out. And that's what you need. And that's why they've signed him. And then, with all the bolt-ons, flights, and God knows what to get them there, and they're not performing, it must be extraordinarily frustrating for Alex Brady and Dale Allett. I think they probably can't. But they're another team that are struggling. Peterborough and Kings Lynn, again, are having a tough time. And if they're going to have any chance of making playoffs, those two teams... when you look at Peterborough, Hans Andersen Everson, the elder statesman of that team, they are going to have to get going big style. And then, when you look at Kings Lynn, you've got KK has got to find some consistency. Nikolai Clint, if he traps, he's fast, and he's going to have to do that all the time. But they're going to have Thomas Jorgensen, a rider that, Scott, I've seen him being fantastic, but suddenly, I don't know what's going on. He doesn't seem to be able to, whether it's a confidence issue, whether it's mechanical, I don't know, but... not the same guy at the moment, just not producing.
No, I think Jorgensen is a very much a mental aspect. If things are in the right place and he feels good in himself, then he's a very, very hard man to beat. But I think his cage gets rattled pretty quick. I think I heard a story, Berwick, I don't know if it was on BSN or not, but he was off gate 4 and obviously wasn't happy with the sort of the selection of ruts he could go from, so he started kicking the fence, which is never a good sign when you're about to go out for a race. But I think with Kings Lynn that the problem they have is that they've got two key riders that can be very hit and miss. And Nikolai Clint, like you said, an exceptional gaiter, exceptionally fast when the right header's on, but he can be hit and miss. And I think that's hard for the rest of the team because the team looks for their 1 and 5 to lead the way, and occasionally they have an off night. But when you've got, riders like that, like you say with KK, I mean, people have seen and heard what he was like at Sheffield, where he literally couldn't look like he'd never ridden a bike before. And then the night I was there, he looked like KK World number 2 again, was unbelievably fast and was a joy to watch. And for management and for teammates, that's unbelievably frustrating. And the frustrating thing with Kasperzak is that only Kasperzak will get Kasperzak going. He's not one of those people that can be motivated by a team manager or a promoter. If he turns up not being in the right frame of mind, not bothered to race, it will not happen. But then, they will have known that when they signed him. It's not like it's a trade secret. He's been like that most of his career. They took the gamble, and right now it's not paying off.
Tough one, real tough one, but they're going to have to, as I say, part of the problem is also in the fact that riders are scarce. There is a lack of riders, and some riders won't come. Some riders sort of look at it. maybe the Saifutinov thing may actually sort of break down some barriers again, and they might look at it and then sort of think about coming over. But on reflection, those two teams are at the bottom of the league right now, and if they have any desires to make the top four, then things have got to turn around very quickly. But I do think they are up against it. I sense that there are some teams that are in a better shape, and often it's difficult to be able to do it, isn't it, Scott? You know, when you get off to that, you get in that rut, and like what happened to you last year after winning the previous year, and I had it at Coventry exactly the same. We were champions one year, and the following year we finished bottom of the table, and for whatever reason, and we had 6 of the same 7 from the previous season. We just didn't get going, and it never, and it was difficult to put your finger on why, but it just didn't happen. It just didn't happen, and the team finished bottom, and it was tough times. But for those two teams in Peterborough and Kings Lynn, there's got to be something really dramatic happen, like a big signing, or 2 or 3 riders really all of a sudden firing at the same time.
Kings Lynn's never slick. I mean, even when it's packed down like concrete, it's still never slick because of the material it's got there. I think if they start to build a reputation of having a slicker track, then you may well start to attract some other riders.
It's an interesting point you make. You know that I've heard stories of riders potentially going somewhere, but then not going to that club for various reasons. You know, and that could be one of them. That they don't like the surface. They don't like it could be transport links, or not near an airport to get them to where they need to be. It could be other things like that. So there's various factors that have to come together to get a rider in. Obviously, Peterborough, that situation I think is largely down to the fact. Also, I don't think Brexit really helps. That riders have to make life easier for themselves so they can come in and out. They've got to have equipment here, so they've got to invest in new bikes, new machinery, new vans, and start again. And they're all at this point in the season going, I can't be bothered with that. That's a big outlay. I didn't plan for it, and and unless you can give me the stuff, I can't make it work.
Yeah, well, obviously that doesn't help at all. But to be perfectly honest, you've always needed extra equipment if you come to ride in England and you're based on the continent. That hasn't changed, but certainly there is always the added complication if you want to come across and do it. But I just hope for Kings Lynn that Josh Pickering can come back fit and firing. He's a good, bubbly character. He's a never say die. He can maybe be an inspirational figure within that side. I like him. But both teams have started poorly, and they I think for Peterborough, if they could manage to pull a rabbit out of a hat and come up with somebody that could really sort of lift the crowd and lift that doom and gloom, I think maybe they could turn it around, because Everson and Anderson have got a lot of quality there. But tough times when you look at the other teams in the league, because they've got a better look about them, and certainly are going to be a tough challenge for those two teams down at the bottom.
Let's talk about Eurosport then. You're back on the TV, and the plan now, Kelvin, is to be on more than you're off, all being well, for the rest of the season. There is a certain amount of fixtures that are covered by Eurosport, so rather than miss some vital stuff at the end of the season, it's probably best to work out that you start a bit later. That's the thinking. And the two of you, I'm not sure if people know this or not, but the two of you are working side by side this year on the Eurosport coverage.
Yeah, I don't know if we'll be holding hands all the time, but certainly we're going to be at all the meetings.
Well, I thought that was part of the agreement.
Oh, well, I'm sorry to
I'm going to have to
disappoint. I know
renegotiate
it's
my
been a tough.
contract.
Yeah, I'm sorry to know it's been a difficult weekend for you, Scotty, but I'm not doing it. I've had a change of heart. No,
Yeah.
it's been a little frustrating that we've had to wait until this point, and clearly people have been sort of a little bit confused why we are starting later this year. But as you said, Ian, it is to try and get a little bit more of a continuity regarding fixtures. Eurosport do have major events, like for example at the moment the Giro d'Italia is on, so that may have had some influence on it, and then they have the French Open and all sorts of things. But by and large, we are trying to do sort of 3 weeks on, 1 week off, weather permitting, and trying to finish the league and complete the playoffs by the end of September. So sort of condensing the season, but to give people regular speedway, not sort of have one and then go missing for 3 weeks. That doesn't help really. So yeah, next week we're on, and as we've already mentioned, let's hope we get off to a flying start. And excited, keen to get amongst it and see some British Speedway. You two have probably seen a season's worth of Speedway already. I haven't been anywhere near a British track yet, so I'm keen to get back up to Leicester and see what's going on. But but hopefully we get a really exciting team. What I don't want is that the jeopardy regarding playoffs was done by June last year. That's why we need these slightly lesser teams to sort of like turn it around if they can. So we've got plenty of fight. But I think Leicester is the one, I think realistically, that could maybe possibly make the top four.
Yeah, definitely. I think they'll be there or thereabouts. And for you, Scott, of course, you're no stranger to the mic in the pits, but getting in the commentary box alongside Kelv for the rest of the season.
Yeah, well, I think they may be flipping it up a little bit, but yeah, I'm going to be involved, which I'm delighted to be part of the Monday night crew. It's something I enjoy, and I'm kind of at that kind of point in my career where I'm still loving racing. I still feel like I've got plenty to offer, but I don't want to be flat out like a lot of the boys are. I've got other things going on in my life, and so it's nice to slow the racing down a bit, but still be involved. And doing the TV stuff, it's still a way of keeping involved with a sport that I love and have a lot of passion for, have done my entire life, like Kelv. So it's cool to still be able to be involved, see what's going on, and see things from the other side, and maybe try and get a few little bits of that insight over to the viewers and try and give them a little bit more of a bit more of an idea of what's going on and a little bit more to the story than just seeing four guys go around on a bike.
Yeah, and I think it's great as well that you are still involved and you are riding against these riders. You have you're able to say what it's like riding against Jason Doyle from as recently as a couple of weeks ago, not like a few years ago or what have you. So it's a great insight, and I know that I was doing commentary the other week with Bomber, and it was the first time he'd ever done it. But he was pointing stuff out that actually you probably don't realise sometimes unless you've actually ridden there. He was saying, I don't know, there was a couple of riders that maybe just locking up slightly, and Bomber said, I rode there last week, and there is a little bit of a patch there that catches you out. Things like that you can offer to the audience that you just would never know, but it often explains why a rider is doing something, and a bit of background as to how these situations come about.
Oh, definitely. It's not just the riding as well. It's just little things that when people are doing. I know Kel for doing commentary and Chris when they're doing the Grand Prix together. That just little things that people have been going to Speedway for 10, 20 years and don't realise silly little things why the rider might do that to the referee or why they look in a certain area. And I know sometimes when you say those things, you kind of repeat yourself, and the people that do know kind of go, well, I already knew that, but there's an awful lot of people that don't, and a lot of people are shy to ask why somebody does a certain thing. So I think it's important that when you're doing like Kelvin the commentary, or if I'm doing a pit piece or something like that, every now and again you point out a few little bits and pieces that perhaps we take for granted that the fans that are not aware of that side of things, and it just hopefully gives them a little bit more of an insight. When they watch, they can watch with a slightly different purpose and can kind of keep an eye out on a few of those little things that have been pointed out and make the night's racing that little bit more enjoyable.
And also on another note as well, we haven't really covered the championship in this podcast, but you are with the Oxford Cheetahs as well, which is, of course, for many a well-known track. Kelvin will have great memories, I'm sure, of racing in some big meetings at Oxford's Cowley in the past. A great little hotbed of speedway there now because unfortunately Swindon have gone by the wayside, at least for the time being. The London area itself, of course, is a bit of a desert as far as speedway goes at the moment. Of course, you've got Kent in the National League down in there, but it does seem to be drawing people in who previously have supported many clubs. There might be Wright House or Lakeside supporters or Swindon supporters who perhaps are going there through gritted teeth, but they're going there to see the speedway nonetheless. And so you're getting big crowds there, and it's a great stadium. And every time I've been there, I've always enjoyed the experience. Everybody seems to be have smiles on their faces, and lots of people turn up.
Oh, they do. It's a track I always loved going to before it closed, and obviously Jamie Courtney and everybody involved. I mean, Man Live, it's been a huge effort to get it back, and they've done a brilliant job. I mean, they're still working on the stadium all the time and improving it, but just moving that inside line in that little bit just has enabled you to have that bit more freedom going into the turns. You don't have to kind of queue up and back up behind somebody as much as you did in the past. So the improvements they've made have been good. And no, I'm glad you've said when you've been there you've enjoyed it, because I enjoyed it last year. We didn't get the results I felt we should have done, but I was happy to go back this year because I did enjoy it. It's a fun track. It's got a good environment, and yeah, they're getting some good crowds in. And
they were, planning to start life in the Premiership, weren't they, as well? But obviously that didn't work out. But nonetheless, it's bringing in these crowds now, and I don't know, maybe one day it will be a decision that they look at, and maybe to replace something. Obviously, we've got well-known problems in the Premiership with one or two clubs, and perhaps Oxford would be well placed with the size of crowds they're getting, and maybe I don't know, maybe further down the line it is a conversation.
Yeah, possibly so. I know they were keen to go up this year, but for one reason or another it didn't quite happen. Personally, I'm delighted they didn't, because that would have ruined my plans. So yeah, I'm delighted to be back with him in the Championship. And look, I think if they did decide to step up to the Premiership, it would be a great addition. I think it would be another fair, sort of reasonably central club. And I think the stadium is brilliant. I think, obviously we know Bellevue is the place for British Speedway in terms of the track and the stadium and things, but Oxford is an impressive outfit too.
It's the only place in Speedway where you get served a burger in a brioche bun. See, that's the extra level you get.
There you go. Yeah. That's got to be their new sales pitch.
I would say.
A little bit more upmarket. Just a little bit more upmarket. Yeah, lovely. But I remember, I have very fond memories of Cowley. When I was riding for Coventry, the clashes with the team that was led by Hans Nielsen, Simon Wigg, Marvin Cox. Those days they won the league in the 80s a couple of times. And as I say, that it was a good track. It was a bit tight, so it's interesting to hear that the track has just been widened a wee bit, because it was tight going into the corners there. You could run into people quite easily. But it may well be that the conversation comes up again, because with the threat of losing Peterborough and obviously the shock news about Wolverhampton, Oxford would be an obvious choice to try and attract to come back up into the Premiership. So we will wait and see. But no, I'm really pleased that to hear that a club that was literally just stood there for 15 years and then has come back. You're never quite sure whether people have drifted away and the interest has waned. But I guess that people are still keen to come to the Speedway there. And with Swindon's closed and no Reading as well, I guess it's somewhere where those fans can go now. They've got a Speedway relatively close by.
It is. I think we'll have to drag you down there, Kelv, and you can have a look at the track, and then maybe we can slip the old Kevlars on. You can do a few laps.
Yes. All right. Okay. You
might be the Chargers' new number one.
Brilliant. Yeah. Blimey. Dear, oh dear, that frightens me. Anyway, but no, it's been great, and I think obviously being Ian and I mentioned this before we started the podcast, Scotty. You know, like not everything is rosy right now. Obviously, with the Premiership, with 2 clubs with a shadow hanging over them in Peterborough and Wolverhampton. But right now, with the 7 teams in and they're going to be running, I'd like to think that we have a successful team and we've got some eye-catching riders that will put bums on seats. No question about that. And I think generally, I'd like to think that we will have really a competitive season. And the weather behaves, because the weather has been a significant factor so far, there's no doubt about it, and that needs to calm down so that we get proper racing conditions.
Oh, there's no question. I think, yeah, you always look at the positives. Of course, we're well aware of the negative bits and aspects, like you say, with Peterborough and potentially the situation with Wolverhampton. We hope that turns around and becomes positive. But I think for me, with the fact that Emil is back, that's a huge scoop, and I think that could potentially open the doors up to other people. The fact that Nicky was prepared to come back, the fact that you still have your Jack Holders, your Dan Bewleys, your Jason Doyles, people like that. And I think, is it a blessing in disguise that we've had the rain-offs and we still have fixtures to get in? Because later in the season, now that those riders are here, word travels, and Emil, I think, is genuinely enjoying himself. Are there a few other big names out there that go, do you know what, actually, I might go to England? There's a bit of structure there. It's a Monday, Thursday. Logistically, I can do it. It'd be fantastic if they did. I mean, there's no question Emil is putting bums on seats and people are keen to watch him. And also, like myself, people are keen to line up against him because he's a rider that hasn't been here for a long time. He's got he's got a huge reputation behind him. And, yeah, he's got a target on his back too.
Well, it's a busy time ahead then, and you begin at Leicester. Do you know where you're heading after that, Kelv, yet, with your Eurosport roadshow?
I possibly do. I do believe that the second meeting will be Wolverhampton v Bellevue, which could be quite tasty, which is a week later. So, as I say, that's an attractive, eye-catching fixture. We then got a week off. We go to Prague for the Grand Prix at the beginning of June. We've got a week off, and then we pick up again when we go, and we will see Ipswich v Sheffield, which will be a fantastic match-up, and the first time for Eurosport viewers to see Emil Sayfutunov live. So, yeah, I think the first 3 fixtures look good, you know, and as I say, we can get up and going.
And Wolves Bellevue, of course, the first time they rode against each other, that was the fixture where Bellevue took an absolute hammering, wasn't it? And I think it got abandoned with the rain, but probably for the best at that point in time, because it was not looking good for Bellevue. But that was the turning point for Bellevue. They took that hammering, and then after that found their mojo a little bit more. Yeah,
sometimes I guess you need to hit the bottom before you can start the upward climb, and I guess that was that point for them, because they got an absolute hammering, and sometimes you need that. Sometimes it's a little bit of a kick up the backside for everybody, the riders and management, and whatever happened, whatever was said after that night, like you say, they certainly got their act together and perhaps starting to perform like a championship a winning team like they are.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, look, thanks for joining us, Scott, and I'll see you not too long from now at Monmore, because you're racing at the time of recording this. It's the Monday, the 15th of May. We're recording this. You're riding for Wolves against Sheffield this evening, so you'll be in action and in thick of it tonight.
Yeah, I better get my backside in gear then. I've got a punch to repair.
Yeah. Oh no! What, on the van?
Yeah. Yeah, I had a blowout last night, so after a very successful not day in Poland, I got welcomed by a punch on the way home. So, yeah, hey ho. No, it wasn't, but today's a new day.
And then on the telly on Monday, of course, with Kelvin and the guys for that season opener on Eurosport, Leicester versus Sheffield Monday night.